Hi, Mike. Thanks so much for doing this and for bringing Lower Decks to us. I'm sorry for that much tweeting about when Lower Decks is coming to Brazil. I'm so sorry about that. And I'd like to say I changed happily his PS5 for your Spock helmet. I think your Spock helmet is cooler.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me ask you about some contracts between what a standard cartoon does and what Lower Deck does. The standard for most cartoons is that they are sort of timeless. So Bart Simpson is 11-year-old for 30 years, and Rick and Morty they don't grow old. I'd like to, and of course, Star Trek on the other hand is very different. It's very different. It's almost obsessive about timeline and time and when does it happen and so on. How did you strike that balance in Lower Decks? Each season is a year like TNG. It's timeless. The characters grow old. How do you think about that?
So it's kind of well, we think about it all the time. For me, what it is you still want to use that sort of, it's what animated shows do, is what Simpsons does, but it's like what Marvel Comics does or DC Comics, where it always feels like you're moving forward, but you're not changing things so drastically that an audience is coming in and not understanding what they're reading or what they're seeing, right? Like you want to slowly build instead of drastically build. And so another way of putting it is serialized light, so that there are serialized character elements and character growth season to season, but that the basic tenets of the show are something that are going to feel familiar. And that's what Star Trek always does, right? That's what a good TV show does, is you want it to feel familiar enough so that at the beginning of the episode, you feel like you know what's going to happen. But then as things progress, you're still being surprised. You're still being delighted at things you didn't see coming. For me, I think more truthfully, to answer your question, I see Lower Decks as a long-term story about a group of ensigns that start at one place and at the end of the series have gotten to another place. And you see that in Deep Space Nine is very serialized. In Voyager, obviously they're in the Delta Quadrant, and then they end up back, spoiler alert, they end up back on Earth in the Alpha Quadrant. For me, for Lower Decks, it's the progression that you're seeing. It's less about watching this overall sort of plot narrative happening, and instead it's watching character growth happen. So you'll see even in first season, the characters start one place and they end up in a different way by the end of the season. And then every season of Lower Decks, because I'm writing season 3 finale right now. That's the fun of it, is how do you keep it feeling Star Trek? How do you let these characters grow, but not let them feel not like Lower Decks? And so, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of thinking things through, but you want it to feel like the audience is going on a journey with these characters, even if it isn't a physical journey, even if it's an emotional character journey.
May I have a quick follow-up, because you're gonna bump up into Picard, Star Trek Picard, if you go forward in a few years. Are you compressing that time to stay behind Picard at the end?
We're being very careful because because what you're talking about is not the actual events of Picard, but the events that lead to the events of Picard, which are around like 2384 or 5. Yeah, that's a big date that changes Starfleet, right? And so our show has to exist between 2381 and 2385 before that event happens that changes Starfleet. So the big lie, the trick of Lower Decks is that these things feel like they're happening. Every episode feels like it's happening a couple months apart, but they're really happening like days apart. Like if you want to stick to the exact Star Trek calendar, all the stuff in Lower Decks, it's a busy life on the Cerritos because there's like a lot of sci-fi stuff. And we make fun of that in the show, where characters are like, wow, it feels like a new science mystery happens every other day around here. So, at the end of the day, when you walk through the star dates on everything, we are keeping it very precise and we're being really careful. And I do have some sneaky ways to get it all in there. But yes, all of the story of Lower Decks is going to happen between 2381 and before the events that kick off Picard.
Thanks, Mike.
Sure.